It starts it over. There we go.
Hey.
Hello. I got a little close. It might have been distorted. What's up? How is everybody doing?
All is good. What's up, Wade?
How you doing, Tater?
I'm doing great, my friend. And my brother.
Cool.
From the same mother.
Yep. Hey, but not a different brother from a different, or same brother from the same mother. How's everybody doing? This is Catch This Bros. I'm Wade Foster. That's Tate Foster.
Tate Foster.
Mm-hmm. Tate the Great. Nothing rhymes with Wade, except I want to get paid. But with that said, I hope everyone's well. Got a couple things going on, but Tate, what's going on with you?
Man, all is good. Things are going good down here in Florida. It's been really warm lately. Matter of fact, I hit up in the 80s today and yesterday, and I'm ready for it to experience a little bit of winter time down here.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's been a little warm here this week. Y'all forgive me for the sun. I'm in a hotel room down at Church of God Prayer Conference in North Carolina, and the sun's hitting me in the face. But all's well. It's been warm here, but last week before it got down cold for this area. But now it's warm backed up, so all is good.
I was looking at my timeline the other day from what stories timelines from past that's gone on, and a job I used to work a long time ago. I was going and doing a lot of work at nursing homes.
Okay.
And I'll just tell you a quick story. It's sort of funny because this nursing home was super long. It was like the length of a football field, but it was like going through 100-foot hallway, then another 50-foot hallway, then another 100-foot hallway, then another hallway and another hallway, and it was like a maze, right?
Oh, wow.
Well, this one day I showed up to do some work there early, and it was probably about 7:00 in the morning.
Okay.
And I come in the door, and about 50 feet in front of me, there's a lady in front of me.
Okay.
And I see her, and she turns around and looks back at me.
Okay.
And when she did, she started moving fast. So I looked around and I looked back behind me. I'm like, what does she see? So I started moving fast. And when I got up turned a corner, and she looked back at me again and took off going in a little bit faster, really like a fast mall walk.
This lady thought you were stalking her, Tate.
So I was like, who's she seeing? So I look behind. I'm not seeing what she's seeing. So I take off walking faster also. I turn the corner, and it's about 100-foot walk. She looks back again. She takes off running. I'm like, hey, I am running. Right. I take off running, right? And I'm just booking it down the hallway, just going. And this lady turns the corner and gets to the front desk of the place. And she's like, ah! And she starts all over.
She thinks you're chasing her.
And the lady at the front desk, she says, oh, I see you've met Tate. And I'm like, hi. I was just running from what you were running from. She's like, I was running from you. I thought you were chasing me.
She's scared the old lady.
And I thought she was running from somebody behind us. And I'm like, I'm scared too. So I'm going to run.
That's funny.
It's so dumb, but hey, it's my life.
But you know what? I wonder what made her do that.
I don't know. Maybe she had a bad experience where, or maybe there was something going on in her life at that time where she was dealing with some fearful things. I don't know.
I mean, I had a similar instance when I was in college. I was working at a Food Lion on Little Rock Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. Food Lion 106. That was the store number. You probably remember. Yeah, I know. Ooh. And so one particular night, the store always closed at 10 o'clock in one particular night. And so I would go out, and I got off early one night because I had to go back to school. I don't remember why, but I had to do stuff at East Coast. And when I went out, I wasn't thinking anything about it. And this lady had just gone out, and I was, about 5 steps behind her, and I'm just walking to my car. You remember my Ford Granada, my 79 Ford Granada that I had, that one whole side was dented in, and I was
jumped that thing.
Yeah, we did. We were the good old. We jumped it, and for those that might watch this at Bird Dorm, we jumped the hill. Or I should. Tate was in the passenger seat and was going, "Don't do it!" As I jumped the hill.
We were like the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, but anyway, when again, we need medicine. As I got closer to my car, I wasn't paying attention. This lady was like 4 or 5 feet in front of me, and it was dark. It was like 8, 9 o'clock, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden she turns and she punches me, slapping my chest. And I go, ugh! And I went, "What'd you do that for?" And I started going, "I'm just going to my car. I'm just going to my car." Well, she had just got done taking a self-defense class.
Yeah. And she wanted to see if it worked on
And
this
she
big
thought
joker.
I was getting ready. Of course, now, granted, this was Little Rock Road, airport side of Charlotte, not necessarily the greatest
Mhm.
area even back then. This was 1980, no, 1990, because
Yeah, it's
it was
just down the road from
yeah,
Tuckasegee.
it was 1990. It was my sophomore or junior, so it was 1991. But it was all about, she had just taken a class on
Mm-hmm.
self-defense, so she hit me. And so it's kind of funny. I'm willing to bet, had she not ever taken that class, that probably would have never happened.
Right.
So
Dang, that's scary. But it's funny because stuff like that forms who we are. You know what I'm
okay,
saying? It sort of forms who we are. If you go, maybe I'm just segueing into this, you can help me out, but
uh-huh.
we there's certain things in life that make us who we are,
Oh,
why
definitely.
we go the directions we go, and and things affect us the way they affect us as human beings. And that's that's probably, I mean, that's why that lady was that's why that lady was running from me. All
Yeah,
have these stories.
yeah, and there's one word they use that describes that. It's context.
Hmm.
Your context, like for instance, we were talking about the temperature a little bit ago, and it made me think about this. Being from Maine, I mean, Tate, you were born in Oklahoma, but you were pretty much raised in Maine. Whenever we went anywhere, we went to grandma's. We
Hmm.
lived in
Yeah.
Maine. Dad pastored in Maine.
Right.
We've lived all over the world, so our context can be varied. But
Hmm.
like for instance, when people in Florida say it's cold, it's not the same thing as when people in Maine say it's cold.
Yeah. People in Florida, when they say it's cold, it's below 60.
Yeah, yeah. Please
If it
remember.
gets below 30 in Florida,
Uh huh.
that's worse than a hurricane to most people around here.
That's crazy to me. See now,
They'd rather deal with a hurricane, a category 4 hurricane coming to shore, than dealing with below 30 temperature.
well, see, that's because in their context they know how to deal with that. Go
Hmm.
back to hurricane. I mean, I live in the mountains of North Carolina. When that hurricane hit, Hurricane Helene hit here, there was no way to predict how that, because we didn't understand the context,
Hmm.
because it wasn't a.
Well, 4 inches of snow
Mm-hmm.
up north that is prepared and ready to deal with that
Uh huh.
is great. But down here, I mean, we got 4 inches of snow over in Pensacola.
Right.
That shuts down the place for the whole time. There's no such thing as a salt truck. I
No.
mean,
Why? Why?
You can go to Walmart or someplace like that and get you a salt shaker and shake it in the driveway, and it may help a little bit. But that's the extent of salting down here. Nobody has
Right.
salt trucks and that kind of stuff running the roads to make it safe. It just shuts everything down.
So, with that said, since we're going this way, let's talk
Context.
about context for a second.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, even with talking about context, and we're talking about Maine and Florida, there's even a difference. But I live in North Carolina. Tate lives in Florida. There's even a difference with context from there. Um, and like one of the craziest context things for me growing up is living up north and stuff. And when you got down in the south, and this is old school holiness. And there's some people that are still this way. And please understand, I'm not saying anything demeaning about any of those individuals, but I find it incredibly interesting, people that are holiness, that when they come to the South, they are still wearing their pants and they're not wearing long shorts because, and I'm not demeaning them. Please understand, I'm not demeaning them at all, but I just find it incredibly, I don't know how to say it other than odd, because they're like, their context is that, up north, we can wear pants, we can be holiness, and it's all right. But when you come to the South and it's so hot, you're going to burn up.
I see what you're saying.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, things that, if I look at my life, things that have made me who I am, a lot of it had to be with our parents. Our parents
Okay.
were, I mean, they instill certain things in us. I remember when I was a kid, when we got cable coming into Mattawamkeag, Maine, and we had a little slide box on top of the TV.
I remember that.
There's context there. I mean, TV. When you think about this, think about news. I mean, this is strange, but when we were growing up, you got news at 6 o'clock in the evening. You know, the TV came
Yeah.
on they did the
There was
national
6,
anthem at
6,
6 a.m.
there was
and then
6,
it would go,
6:30, and then 7 o'clock was national.
yeah. And so, but now you can get
24
bad
hours.
news 24 hours a day.
Bad
And we've
news.
got dedicated bad news channels all
There
over
you
the
go.
place. I mean, when was the last time you turned on a TV and had a channel that was dedicated to good news? It's not.
Yeah. You watched even the good news, the gospel, the TV stations, and they're giving everything that. Sorry, not going to go there. Pet peeve.
But you know that makes us. I mean, in early on in my marriage, my wife and I, we had a son that
Okay.
lived for a short period of
Mm-hmm.
time,
Trenton.
and
Remember?
his name was Trenton, and he was born, and he lived with us for about a month after he was born. He had a condition called transposition
Uh-huh.
of the great vessels. He had a heart condition, and you know, I didn't know how to handle that when I was going through it. All I knew is what I've been taught. What my teaching has always been, and my parents taught me that, hey, you get through it. You pray.
Right.
You trust in the Lord. We don't understand why things happen the way they happen, but you just keep on going on.
Right.
And me and Mom had a conversation the other day. We were talking about how when that whole situation was going on, she came to us and said to me, and Shanzi says, I don't know how you guys are doing this. I don't know how you're handling this. And I looked at her and I said, get yourself together.
Yeah.
This is what you taught us to do.
Yeah.
This is what you taught us to do. And when I was going through that period of time, I would pray to God, and I felt like the prayer would come out my mouth and fall right to the ground. I didn't
Right.
feel like I didn't feel like my prayers are going anywhere.
Right.
But you know what? I was praying,
Right.
asking God. I was asking God to heal, but then I changed a little bit through that. And I asked God, let your will be done in this situation. I don't know what you have with this situation. And Trenton ended up passing away. And it was very hard and it was difficult.
Right.
Because you're not used to burying your child. But it made me a better father.
Okay.
It made me a better person. And God used it as a tool, and I plan on one day seeing Trenton in heaven.
Right.
But it really changed my perspective on life,
Uh-huh.
and it made me, you know, form me into who I am now, and has helped the way I tend to sit back and think about stuff now. Before my first reaction to stuff is always wrong. My first knee-jerk reaction, if you're being melted to me, my first knee-jerk reaction may be to punch you in the mouth.
Right.
But instead of punching you in the mouth, I passed that, and I was like, okay, think about it, and then come up with the
Right.
next thing. Yeah.
So patience. It's funny because you were talking context, and one of the words that kept coming in my mind was perspective. And the interesting thing is context. This is how my brain works, and the more people watch this, they'll get this. One thing usually produces the other. Like, for instance, last podcast we did, we talked about how motivation produces momentum. Well, context produces your perspective. And perspective is your attitude or thought on how something works. And so, and I say that to say this, Tate and I come from a context, and this is our second podcast, and you guys are going to find out. We are Christians. We were raised in a family with a mom and a dad. Was things perfect? No. Were things great? Yes, but sometimes they were greatly chaotic. But because of the way that we were raised, we have a context. Because of where we're from, we're Yankees. We have a context. Because of the experiences that we've had traveling around the world, we have a context. And all those different contexts give us a perspective that might be different. So, like, for instance, in our podcast, we'll talk about anything and we'll disagree. Some of you listening are going to disagree, and that's fine. Because one of the greatest things that I think our parents taught us, and as soon as I start to say it, I know Tate will like, yeah, that's right. Our mom and dad had a phrase that taught us that you can disagree. What's the rest of it, Tate?
And not be disagreeable.
Without being disagreeable.
Yeah.
We can disagree without being disagreeable. And one of the things that really bothers me in the Christian climate, political climate, the climate of the world now, is people have their context and their perspective. And if you don't agree with them, if you disagree, they're not going to be agreeable or nice in anything they do. And I say all that to say this: we can have a different opinion and still respect each other. And I'll let you guys know, you might watch this and not be a Christian. You might watch this and be a Muslim. You might watch this and be an atheist. I hope so.
Well, you and I have had amazing conversations about all kinds of subjects. And
right.
There are several things that we disagree on.
Yeah, and part of that is our perspective too, because I'm a lead pastor and you're a pastor, but not the lead. You've been youth pastor, you've been minister.
Pastor.
It's because you're old.
Yeah.
Show me in the Bible where anybody called retired. Okay, perspective. But
I should say retired youth pastor. I was a youth minister for 30 years, youth minister and music minister.
Right.
Yeah, 30 years.
And so because of that, whenever we talk about whatever the subject is, people might disagree, but our context is going to come out, even though we might not be talking about a Christian subject. Our context is going to come out. That doesn't make you our enemy. And I hope that doesn't make us your enemy if you're watching this.
That's super important, because in life, no one agrees with everything. And
you can't.
We have been put in I don't know if it's social media that puts us this way or why us human beings have gone this direction. But if you politically sway one way and somebody else politically sways another way, what ends up happening is it's almost like a death sentence, because people hate so much.
Right.
You know, I respect my Republican brothers and my Democratic brothers and sisters. I mean, that's a big thing. I've got respect. And you know what? I can listen and disagree with you on something, and I'm not going to be angry about it. And the other thing I'm going to do, if you say something to me that I don't quite understand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to research it.
Right.
I'm like, you know what? I don't know about that. Let me look that up and let me do some research on that. And we got a lot of people now that are keyboard junkies that are getting fed something and then they react to it, opposed to.
Yeah, because of where they get their news source, or because of the way social media is. I can't even remember what it's called. The algorithms. That's the word I was looking for. Because of what you look at, it'll show you what you're interested in, and you'll keep getting the same thing. And you won't see the whole perspective of what's really happening.
Well, I think it's important to look at it all.
Right.
Look at it all. Watch Fox News. Watch MSNBC. Watch CBS if that's what you are and you're that person. And
News Nation and Newsmax.
Newsmax and News Nation, yeah, those two. But that's what
I even watch Al Jazeera.
You know, I read the Quran.
Me too. Found out that Jesus was in it, and they called him the Messiah. Isn't that funny?
It is funny, but I've did that just because I feel like you can't be an effective witness a lot of times dealing with somebody that's of a Muslim lifestyle if you don't know anything about them,
right?
Where they're coming from,
right?
That's perspective.
Yeah, we were talking perspective and that type of thing. It's just really interesting because I mean,
what's something that has molded you, just made you who you are?
Oh wow, that's a loaded question, Tate. Let's say after college, when you went your way and I went my way. Just the life experiences. I mean, you and I were talking about one the other day, Tate. We didn't even think about this. It plays right into this. Some of you might not know this. When I was right out of college, from that food line, I met somebody at that food line. We fell in love. We got married. Years later, we had 2 children. It fell apart. Marriage broke up. And I went through a really, really hard time. Now, I say all that to say this. That's backstory, not throwing that person under the bus or my 2 oldest children. I love Avery. I love Evan dearly. Very involved in their lives. But because of that, life got incredibly difficult. Financially, it was hard. And so like I remember the holidays, Christmas. As a
Oh
kid, dude,
yeah,
I
yeah.
loved Christmas. Loved
Hmm.
Christmas.
As an
Um,
adult, though, you hated
I hated it
Christmas.
up until a
Yeah,
couple of years ago.
I remember that.
And part of it was like, for example, context perspective. I remember struggling when I was a single father living in what I call the aluminum ghetto. Now, you guys must say, what in the world is the aluminum ghetto? I lived in a trailer park that had about 30 trailers, and there were 22 registered sex offenders in that trailer
Hey,
park.
trailer
Okay.
park.
And I called it the aluminum ghetto because it was the aluminum ghetto. I literally had the best trailer in that park. To put that into perspective, that trailer got purchased for $6,500.
My goodness. Hmm.
Okay. When I moved in, I had to put a new ceiling on the inside. I had the only concrete driveway. So, but I struggled. And so I would have Avery and Evan, my two oldest kids, when they were young
Hmm.
at that time. I would pick them up Thursday night,
Right.
get them to school Friday. I worked 4 10s at the time. And so I had them Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, all day Sunday, and I would drop them off Sunday night after church.
Right. Right. Right.
And I got paid once every 2 weeks. And so I would basically feed them, and I would get to eat the weekend that they were there that I got paid. Then the next week, I would fast the whole week, not being spiritual, but because I didn't have money to buy food, so that when they came over, I could feed them.
I
Um,
remember coming up and visiting you one time there, and all you had was 3 things of ramen noodles.
yes, sir. They were 10 cents a piece.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons Christmas got hard, I remember one of the first Christmases, I had $20 taped to my name to buy my kids
Hmm.
Christmas. And
Right.
so I was like, I was upset. I actually remember laying in the floor in my living room in that trailer, balled up in the fetal position, crying. And the next thing I know, there was a knock on the door. And when I answered the door, it was a guy named Justin. He said, "Hey," he lived about 45 minutes away. He goes, "I was praying, and God told me to come pray for you. You're going through something." And I told him what I was going through, and how bad I felt. Now, financially, he couldn't do nothing. The kid was younger than me. He was at the time 18, 19, 20, but he was somebody that I'd connected with and ministered with.
Hmm. Right.
And when he came and prayed for me, when he got up, when he left, I was like, God, I only have $20. The next day, I went to the dollar store and I bought 10 presents for Avery, 10 presents for Evan, wrapped them individually to give them Christmas.
Right.
And so that perspective affected me, that after being single for years, then getting remarried, and then having the 3 children that I have now. So I have 5 total children. So there's Avery and Evan from my first marriage. And then with Brooklyn, my wife now, who I adore, I have Elise, Valerie, and Gavin. And so for the longest time around Christmas, they would walk on eggshells. And it didn't play that when they were young as well, I was working for FedEx. And so when you're a FedEx delivery guy,
You're delivering on Christmas.
you're delivering on Christmas. You don't see
Right.
your family until like after Christmas. And
Hmm.
so when I moved to Marion, I had that perspective that was carried over from the divorce, being a single dad,
Right.
to now working so much, and I didn't like it. And then actually, the person that changed it was your wife.
She's a good woman.
And one of the only women I'm scared of to this day. Mom, you're included too. And of course, my wife. But I was sitting there down at you guys' house, and I don't even remember how it came up. But Shancy, and I'm trying to get the words exactly what she said, but it was along the lines of, Wade, get over yourself. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, you're destroying the magic of Christmas for your kids because of your experiences, and you're incredibly selfish. Grow up and get over it.
Wow.
And it
That's
ticked me off.
that's heavy.
Oh, yeah. It ticked me off.
I could see you got really, really quiet
Oh,
probably.
yeah. I was like, I was, I was like, I was mad.
Yeah,
But then when I went home, I got to thinking about it. And I don't know if she remembers it or not, or the way that I remember, but I'm pretty sure that I called her maybe a month or two later, or maybe even a year or so later.
hmm
And I thanked her, because then I started putting the effort in. I started one day while Brooke was at work, actually since living in Marion, where I live now, and I've been there be 8 years come June. That wife was at work one day. When she came home, I had all the Christmas decorations up,
hmm
tree up, everything. And this is in November. I would fight Brooke that I didn't want to put the Christmas tree up till December 9th.
December 9th.
You know why?
It's a great day.
Why? Tell them why.
Everybody should celebrate December 9th, because December 9th, 1968, a wonderful child was born to Greg and Leanne Foster.
Yep. Named
December
Tate
9th.
Dwinell Foster.
And we must celebrate.
Yeah. And so in my mind, I was like, hey, we're going to put the Christmas tree up on Tate's birthday. And that's the way I always wanted to do it. And it was because I really didn't want to put it up and it would only be up for a couple weeks.
I gotcha. I think we things in life that form us who we are and make who we are. I think more things that have happened that have been tough circumstances or hard circumstances or terrible circumstances
Right.
in my life has formed me who I am.
Oh, definitely.
The good stuff is good and you celebrate and it's amazing. But the tough things, I mean, are the ones that really form. I can tell you the thing that really made me become a Christian. When I was a kid, I never lived as a Christian. I grew up in a pastor's house, but I always felt like I could never do it. I was like,
Right.
I'm not going to do this thing because I don't have the ability to do this. Because I was thinking in myself, you know what? I'm not good enough. I'm a terrible kid. I don't mind my parents. I do whatever I want to do, and I get beat. I got grounded for a whole summer.
Beat
one
means
time.
spanking, not.
I got a spanking. I remember one time watching TV through a spoon down the hallway.
I remember that.
So because I was grounded, I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't do anything the whole summer. And but I remember I had a good friend in high school named Trevor and Ricky Grass. Trevor Jordan and Ricky Grass, and they were good friends of mine. And they were supposed to pick me up on a Saturday, and we were supposed to go to a party. And they're going to be distributing, well, I'll just say it. I was with them, and we were going to be distributing a lot of weed is what we're going to be doing. We were going to be selling illegal stuff at this
Two
party.
shows in a row talking about marijuana.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was
Our
part
context.
of my life for a while. And so what I did is I told them, hey, I couldn't go with you guys because my grandmother, bless her soul, Wyone Robinson, she wanted me to come down and go to church with her. So that next day, I drove down that day, and I had a Plymouth Volare station wagon that I bought from a farmer for $400.
Oh, the Bondo buggy.
The Bondo buggy, and I drove that down to Herman Made, and
Bright red.
The next morning, I got up with Graham, and we went to Brent Trueworthy's church. And during the church service, we got the phone call because we didn't have cell phones on the hard line that Ricky had died in the car wreck, and Trevor ended up going to being putting in a mental situation, and
because of the car accident.
Yeah, it died years later. It was a terrible situation, and it was the hand of God that kept me from going to my grandmother's place. But that formed my life, and it really had a big effect on me after I gave my heart to the Lord. Why I went into youth ministry, because I've seen so many things and did so many stupid things that I was like, you know what, God, I got to do this because I know kids, I know teenagers, I know what they need to know, and they need, and I wasn't afraid to tell them what's up.
You know, it's funny because, not funny, haha, but funny because I remember that at that time period, and I had been, I wasn't a perfect kid by no kid, but I never, Tate and I were raised in the same house, but we took different paths.
Yeah, I was the perfect kid. Go ahead.
There's no such thing as a perfect kid. But I was the kid, if I did something, I felt so guilty, I would then run down to mom and dad crying and tell them what I did. Yeah. Tate would be like, you're stupid, and then punch me in the face. Because he usually is part of it somewhere. Isn't that the truth?
That's somewhat
quick funny story. Mom tells us better. When I was not even a year old and in the crib, Tate and I shared a room. This will put this into perspective.
I was 3.
Tate was 3, but on the top bunk. And Tate's name is not spelled T-A-T-E. It's spelled T-A-I-T.
Yes.
Well, I'm an infant, not even a year old. I'm in the crib across the room, and it's nap time. Mom comes in, and Tate's standing on his bunk, and his name is written in crayon on the ceiling. And Mom asked Tate, who did that? He pointed at me in the crib, said, Wade did it.
Because he did.
No, I didn't. I was in the crib. And now, I don't remember this, but Mom tells this story. I just remember. So this is our life. So with that said, taking the different perspective, the different life, I remember Ricky and Trevor's thing, because it was dramatic, because we found out in between, we lived in the parsonage, and we were coming up from Sunday school and in the lobby of Mattawamke Church of God. And that's when we found out, was in between Sunday school and the main service. And I was upset because several weeks before that, without going into great detail, I had flirted really heavy with Ricky's girlfriend. And Ricky wasn't too happy about it. I'll just go that way. And I thank you, Tate, for saving my life. But I remember being heartbroken that Ricky had died. And then I remember that Tate had told me that he was supposed to be going. And I'm sorry. Yeah, Ricky was the driver, and Ricky's the one that died. But Tate was supposed to be the designated driver that night.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the designated driver because they were going to be getting involved in all the festivities that were going on.
And months later, I wasn't thinking about it. I'd just been praying for Tate to get his life right with God. And even after that incident, you weren't right with God, but it shook you.
Well, 2 weeks later, we had Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames come to
I played it in your bedroom.
Yeah, you remember that?
I set the video camera up in your bedroom and showed you the one with the preacher's son. I remember that.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was the night you gave your life to God. So
it's crazy. It's crazy how things affect you and change you.
Right.
I mean, people change you, affect you. I mean, for good and for bad. I mean, it goes all kinds of different ways.
Yep.
Wow. It's crazy.
This was kind of heavy.
It is a little bit heavy, but you know, I can tell you this. One thing that my guilty pleasure is I like stand-up comedy.
Okay, I can see that. If you ever heard Tate preach, you'd understand it. That's not a slam; it's a compliment.
Matter of fact, when I went to Bible college and was learning how to deliver the gospel, I remember I got up there, and what I did back then, all I had for context was comedians. Matter of fact, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. I mean, they're not godly at all.
No, not at all.
But
your favorite was Eddie Murphy Raw. I remember very well.
But they would
before Christ,
how they built a comedy act, how they wanted to get to the punchline, and how they. So I would do the same thing in creating my messages, and I did it for so long.
Right.
After that, and I remember being in homiletics class, Dr. Voris in the class he came up to me after the class and he said, I really enjoyed the humor and everything that you brought to the pulpit. But he said, you're not going to be a senior pastor, correct? I said, no, I'm called to be a youth pastor. He said, good, stay in your lane.
I can hear Dr. V saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember homiletics class well. He learned a lot. Sometimes stuff that he taught me stuck.
We talked about it last week, and we also referenced Ralph Rummel in the Bleed.
Yeah, Stop the Bleed.
Stop the Bleed broadcast.
Ministries.
Ministries. I'm sorry, Ralph, if you're watching. But the storm that went through this fall where you're at, is going to affect people in the long run for a long time. Yeah. It has affected you. I can see where it has affected you positively, and really what it did with you and with your church. Also, when you went through your situation where you near-death situation.
Oh, yeah.
With that right there, it changed.
July and August of 21.
I remember before you went for the surgery situation there, and
I was a jerk.
You were harsh and very hard around the edge and very tough on a lot of stuff. We'd have some conversations, and I'd get off the phone. I was like, this guy right here, he's my brother, but I think he's lost his mind. He's such a mean dude.
Yeah, you said to me one time, where was the kid that I grew up with?
Yeah, I remember that. Where's this kid I grew up with? And I remember, and then you went through that situation where a matter of fact, you died what?
3 times.
3 times you died. And I remember after you came out of it, and this was months later, I was talking to you on the phone, and you began to weep over something. I forget what you were crying about.
It was probably honestly pretty stupid, but I changed.
But God softened your heart through that situation. He and also when you minister and when you preach in the pulpit, the thing I've noticed, and I know this is personal, but what I've noticed is the fervor in there. It's like God preached it to you first before you preached it to your people, where it
Oh
felt
yeah.
like before you were preaching a message, but was it really something coming from the heart? It just felt like it was coming from the hip.
I was preaching. I worded just a little different. I was preaching a sermon, not a message.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I was preaching words on the paper that had impact because it was coming from the Bible, but it wasn't lived. Another way to say that is I was a Pharisee.
Dang, dang, Wade, going out with the
Yeah.
right.
Oh yeah. I had all the trappings, looked good on the outside, said the right things, did the right things.
Wow. I wish you
Um,
wouldn't use words I can't spell. Is that
but
something?
Pharisee, not Fair. Fair I see. No, no. But I had and please let me say something. I was definitely saved. I was going to heaven. But that actually goes back to the same situation that I went through. The hardness of that, I got so that I was so preserving myself to survive
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I lost my empathy and compassion. Um, the fact that Brooklyn married me when I was like that is amazing. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Literally, she is the most patient woman in the world. Um, it's funny because sometimes I'll start crying and I'll look at her and I'm like, "You've been praying for me to get soft again, haven't you?" And she's like, "Yep." Yeah, I mean, because God answers her prayers, dude. It's scary, scary good, but scary. But no, I had to become tender again, and it as a pastor, when you lose your compassion, you lose your empathy, you're standing up in front of people and you're preaching to them. And what I'm about to say, this is not 100% across the board, but there were times where people would be talking to me and I'd be looking right at them, but not hearing a word coming out of their mouth because I'm thinking about what I got to do, who I got to go talk to. And they're telling me something that means a lot to them. And as a pastor, I'm responsible to care for them the way that Jesus would care for them. And that's hard. And when you don't have compassion because you're self-preserving yourself
Mm-hmm.
and you lose that edge, you lose your effectiveness. You're anointed. What you're preaching is anointed. The Bible says the word of God will not return void. So you can be a
Right.
full-blown sinner and preach the word of God and people are going to get saved because the Bible's powerful. But
Mm-hmm.
when you get the two to line up and you're no longer a Pharisee, in other words, you're a believer and a follower rather than just going through the motions,
Right.
God anoints you and the word.
Mm.
And it's
That's,
powerful.
that is powerful right there.
Is
That is
it? Am I
powerful.
perfect? No, please, no. I never want to be.
Nah, none of us are. I'll admit that I'm not perfect.
Mom's the only person that thinks she's perfect, though.
She's not perfect.
Mom, say it upside down. Wow.
No, we
Yep.
are not perfect. Matter of fact, you were spelling that word for me, and it just reminded me of something I remember when I was a kid. You remember back in the day, in
You know, old people say back in the day.
well, oh, I heard you say it. Say
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I was copying you.
But you remember back in the classroom, I don't know if they still do this classroom. They used to take the kids, they line them up against the wall like they're getting ready to get you know, a lineup, at prison, where they line up
Okay. Yeah,
against the
yeah,
wall,
yeah, yeah.
everybody turn to the right, everybody turn to the
Prisoner number
left.
one,
They
step
line all the
forward.
kids up and they do this little thing called the spelling bee. And the
Oh,
first
yeah.
kid goes up against the second kid and it goes down the whole line.
Yeah, I
And
was
I
usually one
remember,
of the last two because I beat
and
everybody.
I I was always like, I can't do this because I could not spell. But there was another kid in the class that couldn't spell worse than I did, and I got out,
That's
and
pretty bad.
I'm sitting over in my seat. Yeah, it's really bad.
He
I'm
couldn't spell.
sitting in
I
my
mean,
seat.
they'd
I
say it's
think
gotten better, but wow.
I think his name was Ricky, and
Okay.
Ricky. They come up to Ricky and
Are
they
you talking
say,
in King's Castle?
"Yeah," and they're like, "Ricky, spell cat," and Ricky's like, Kat, cat.
He was
And
in middle school.
then he comes over to sit down. No, I was in grade school, and it might not have been at King's Castle. He comes over
Okay.
to sit down, and as he's passing by me, he's like, "Hey Tate, everybody knows there's two T's in cat."
That's hilarious. Are you serious?
Yeah, and I was like, because I didn't know. I was like, Yeah, you're right.
Oh, you dumb. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
it is so wrong, but you know,
It's
it's
all right
good
though.
though.
It's
It's
all
all
right though.
good.
It's all right.
It's all
Whew,
good.
that's funny. So we talk about context, we talk about perspective. People listening, I want you to think about just an idea. Think about the things that shape your ideas. And here's the thing that I find interesting, Tate, with context and perspective. I have mine. One of the things that shaped my context was actually going to East Coast Bible College, a Church of God school, raised Church of God.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I had the opportunity to go back to school to get my graduate degree, my master's, I decided to go to a school that wasn't Church of God. And I had a lot of people question it. I had a lot of people say, "Oh, you don't want to listen because they're going to teach you
It was
liberal."
Methodist, right?
It was AME Zion. It was
Okay.
Hood Theological Seminary. Good
Hood.
school. Loved it. Great time. And they were also, because they're AME Zion, which stands for African Methodist Episcopal Zion. The best way I know how to describe it, it's kind of like how there's the Church of God and there's the Church of God in Christ, both Pentecostal denomination,
Mm-hmm.
but one is more predominantly Caucasian and the other one is more predominantly African American.
Right.
The United Methodist Church is more predominantly Caucasian, where the AME Zion is more predominantly African American.
Gotcha.
And so, because of that, and their doctrine being very similar, they were recognized. The United Methodist had people on staff at Hood Theological Seminary to teach United Methodist polity. In other words, their politics, their governmental structure, and they got full credit. Because to be a minister in the Methodist Church, you have to have your master's degree to be ordained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. So
Right.
I went there, and a lot of people questioned it because on the baptism of the Holy Ghost, different stuff. But I'm grateful because I went in there, and my context and my perspective was challenged, and I actually came out of there stronger, still holding very, very strong to what I believe. But rather than just believing it because it was told me, I believed it because I got into it to study it. And once I studied it and found out it to be accurate, I now know how to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So my context changed, where it's not, I believe this because this is what I taught. My context changed into my perspective because it got challenged.
That's good. That's real good.
And so when
Well,
you're watching this, if your context doesn't agree with us, study it out and let it challenge you and see where it takes you.
besides your father and your mother
Mm-hmm.
or a family member, is there anybody outside that realm that has maybe a historical figure or just anybody really that has really helped in making you who you are?
Wow. A lot of people. I have several people that I look up to when it comes to ministry. Pastor Roy Lee Tucker from the Praise and Place poured into me, cared for me, loved me. I was Chris Kennedy's youth pastor for 6 years. I could go through many, many different ministers as far as when it comes to church. When it comes to personal, um, probably one of the greatest men I know, and I don't even know if he'll ever watch this. I don't even know if you know him. His name is Charles Atkins. He's my wife's. They're not related, but he works in the Men and Women of Action. He lives in Cleveland, Tennessee. He's a big, tall guy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was going through one of the hardest things that I've ever been through in the ministry, Charles is not a pastor, but Charles is a man of God. And I was
Mm-hmm.
going through a real hard time. And I went over to visit his mother as she was on her deathbed. And when I walked up on the front porch, because his mother was actually a member of State Street Church of God before I ever went to pastor there, which was interesting because my wife was literally Charles and Sharon's nanny to their oldest son when he was little.
Okay.
And so there's this, he was at Brooks in my wedding tape. You might remember the real big
Mm-hmm.
tall guy. She called her second parents.
Right, right. I remember that.
And so Charles, he doesn't even realize how much that he shaped me. But even when I was in the hospital tape, the dreams that I had, Charles was in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked up on that porch, went in, prayed with his mother, came back out and sat with him. And he's like, "Wait, are you okay?" And I said, No, I'm really not, Charles. I'm going through a hard time. And he just looks at me, Southern country cowboy guy. Well, God knows.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Stand up." I said, "Okay." And he stood up. And of course, I'm 6'1", 6'2". I stand up. He's 6'8", 6'9",
Yeah,
hand the
yeah.
size of Texas. and
Mm-hmm.
reaches in his pocket, pulls out a bottle of anointing oil, puts it on his hand, and lays hands on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just began to weep and got broke. And the situation, I still had to deal with it. But this goes in, I didn't even think about this. It goes into what we're talking about. The funny thing is we think many times as a Christian, we think we're going to go to God and it's going to change everything. It's not. What happens is when you go to God and you give it to God, the situation might not change,
Right.
but your perspective will.
I would say in my life, outside of family and close friends, the one person that has impacted my life the most is somebody that passed away
Mm-hmm.
before I was born.
Really?
Yeah.
Who?
And just, I started looking into this man's life and started studying about him and started learning about him and I listened to a lot what he said, went back and listened to speeches that he said and just
Mm-hmm.
bunches of stuff. And just, matter of fact, my phone is loaded right now. I think I have like 5 different quotes. Here's one right here. It says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter."
Mm.
Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that.
Oh, yeah.
Let
Yep.
me tell you what, Martin Luther King Jr. has impacted my life amazingly. Impacted it so much that when I was when I had young children, I remember one time we were at a store and there was a man that was stealing some stuff, and the kids, my daughters, saw the man
Right.
stealing, and this man happened to be a man of color. And when we got in the car, I asked my children, I said, "The man that was stealing his stuff, can you describe him to me?" And one was like he had ripped jeans on, and the other one was like he had Converse sneakers on, and the other one was like he had a blue shirt with stripes and this, that, and the other. And started saying all that, and then they're like he had earrings. You know, they were describing everything except for the color of his
Ethnicity.
skin.
Yeah.
And I was so proud as a dad.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it's important to break down that barrier.
Right.
And I think it's been up too long in so many ways. And I think you and I, growing up, being around the United States military and being around so many people of different, living in Germany, living in Belgium, living all over the place, it has impacted our life.
Oh, very much so.
And that may be a broadcast we have down the road. Matter of fact, we should talk about how God has affected us and how it's been so amazing in our lives, and
I have one written down actually to go into that, talking about the difference between prejudice and racism. People don't understand they're two separate things, but they lump it all under racism and stuff. Yeah, that would be incredible, because the fact is, I don't care who you are, you deal with some prejudices, or other words, some things that you prefer, and that's what a lot of people.
But Martin Luther King made a huge impact, and still to this day he does.
I didn't know that, Tate. That was interesting. When I went to Hood, I took a class called it was a whole class, a whole semester on the theology of Martin Luther King.
Well, he was just what he did to our nation. I mean, I look back at when him and Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders was just a young guy. He was marching with Martin Luther King. Did you know that?
Yep.
And I look at some of those pictures and I was like, man, if I was old enough or alive back then, I'd be right there marching too. Because I just think he's done some amazing things. I think
he did.
Ronald Reagan was another one that did some amazing things in this country. And I'm not talking about people in ministry, of course, but I'm talking about people that have affected the United States of America. And I'm excited about, those things. And that is
it's funny because
who I am.
Well, you went to a preacher, but most people, they know that Martin Luther King was a preacher. But I went to like people in church. And like now, if I were to say somebody that had a big impact on me with their writing and teaching and stuff like that I find very interesting is, believe it or not, Gandhi.
Yeah.
And people go, what? Do I agree with him? Not at all. But there's one particular quote, and I hope I say it right, that Gandhi said, and it's a challenge to me. He said, the only thing that keeps me from being a Christian is Christians.
Yeah. Wow.
In other words, he agreed with what they said they believe, but they don't live it.
Man, yeah.
Interesting. Context, perspective, that type of thing. So Awesomeness. This is a good podcast, man.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should wrap it up.
Oh yeah, we just hit the 50-minute mark.
Yeah.
50.
We'll post this thing and we'll be.
Well, hey, listen, we're going to try to drop another one next week. This one will probably, whenever it shows up, I'll let you know when the next one's coming up. We got several topics, several things we're going to be talking about. This is going to be an ongoing thing. Let your friends know, let your neighbors know, let people you don't like know, let people you do like know.
Yeah, we may post. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're good.
We may post some stuff on Facebook of what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, give us some ideas too.
And you guys may have some thoughts of some things that you want us to discuss. We would love to discuss them. We're
cool.
Pretty wide open.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, Tater, you ready to go on out?
All right. Yes, sir. And everybody, you guys have a blessed one. Be good. Out.
All right. Catch this, y'all.